On August 1st, 2008, the Russian armed forces began military operations against the Republic of Georgia. The war only lasted a short 5 days of combat operations, and the Russian military won a quick and decisive victory. However, this was a weak opponent, and the Russian forces enjoyed massive superiority. The 58th Army contained roughly 8 motor rifle regiments centered on the 19th Motor Rifle Division, and in the skies the Russian Air Force deployed 7 regiments of strike, bomber, and fighter aircraft. This total force numbered over 70,000 men and several hundred aircraft, including Su-27 flankers and Tu-22 backfires. To oppose this massive combined arms force, the Georgians deployed around 10,000 men and had no real air force to speak of. In the aftermath of the conflict, international observers and domestic Russian analysts agreed that the Russian operation had been a debacle. Despite having overwhelming superiority, the Russian forces had performed poorly. Command and control was a particular failure. Russian communications equipment, much of it 30 years old, was found to be unreliable. Russian battalion and regimental commanders were forced to utilize personal mobile phones to contact each other, and one journalist who was observing the conflict at the headquarters of 58th Army claimed that the Russian commander asked to borrow his personal satellite phone to contact a regimental HQ. This led to a serious breakdown in communications between the different Russian formations, which slowed down the advance and caused several friendly fire incidents. This breakdown in communications was also caused by very poor inter-service cooperation. The Navy, Army, and Air Force all utilized different communications equipment, and with no liaison officers at regimental level, the integration between the Air Force and ground units was practically non-existent. This lack of communications led to the loss of 3 aircraft to friendly fire. In summation, Russian forces had shown extremely poor situational awareness, experienced substantial problems with military communications, and had demonstrated limited coordination between the different force branches. Russia's losses to reasonably meagre air defense systems were also substantial. Given the large forces available in the 4th Air Army, the Russians were only capable of conducting around 200 missions during the conflict. On the first day, Georgian air defences downed a Tu-22M3, an Su-24MR, and 3 Su-25s. The Buk SAM system proved to be extremely difficult for the Russians to counter. The entire Georgian Air Force only consisted of 12 Su-25 ground attack aircraft, which were not really capable of air defense. Yet this small force was able to conduct strike missions on the Russian ground forces until the last day of the conflict. The Russian Air Force was unable to achieve air superiority. Additionally, their ability to conduct effective strikes at night was severely limited. One of the most crippling elements was the lack of effective reconnaissance, both at the operational level and at the regimental level, as Russian ground forces were left blind to stumble into Georgian ambushes. Russian armor was also found to be notably vulnerable to man-portable anti-tank weapons. The Russian General Staff were confronted with the reality that the legacy of the Red Army had to be abandoned. A new structure had to be adopted, but the challenges were massive. With a million-strong army, tens of thousands of aging armored fighting vehicles, and thousands of Soviet-era aircraft all requiring modernization or replacement, Russia's meager defense budget would be tested. Nonetheless, the Georgia 2008 war spurred the largest reform of the Russian military in decades. The first major change was organizational. Prior to 2008, the Russian army had relied upon essentially the same model as the Red Army. It had dozens of divisions that were fully equipped with Soviet-era equipment, but only staffed with a skeleton of individuals. These forces were kept at a very low level of readiness and required mobilization to even come up to strength, in addition to the time needed to reach a reasonable level of operational effectiveness. These units were simply too unwieldy and too slow to be useful in the kind of minor conflicts the Russian army was likely to fight. In 1996, the army manned 13% of its regiments at 80% of their wartime complement. The remaining 87% were kept at cadre level, with all of their equipment in storage. All of this dead weight ate up massive resources and provided the Russians with very limited capability beyond a full-scale war. To address this problem, the Russian General Staff decided to swap the divisional structure for a much more flexible and mobile brigade structure. These divisions would be consolidated into brigades, which are generally around 1/3 the size of a division. A typical motor rifle brigade is composed of 3 motor rifle battalions of mechanized infantry, a tank battalion of around 40 tanks, logistics, engineer, signals, artillery, air defense, and anti-tank elements. The strength of this new formation is around 4,400 men. The new brigade structure is far more mobile at the strategic level and can respond much more rapidly. These are considered by the General Staff to be half divisions. By 2009, this reorganisation had taken place, with the army now composed of 4 tank brigades, 35 motor rifle brigades, and numerous air defence, missile and intelligence brigades. The total number of these formations was 85. This process basically eliminated the cadre divisions, allowing the whole army to maintain a much higher state of readiness, even if its overall paper strength had been greatly reduced. The next major reform was personnel. The Russian army had typically relied heavily on conscripts. However, the level of training these men had received prior to the 2008 war was insufficient. Additionally, there were simply not enough conscripts coming of age every year to staff the army. The decision was taken to greatly increase the number of professional contract soldiers. In 2008, there were 4 conscripts for every 1 contract soldier. However, by 2015, for the first time ever, the number of professionals outnumbered conscripts. This has substantially changed the composition of the Russian army, greatly increasing both competence and readiness. Additionally, the decision was made to ensure that the entire NCO corps was made of professionals. The total personnel had dropped from 1,130,000 in 2008 to just over 1 million in 2017, of which 384,000 were contract soldiers compared to 276,000 conscripts. Now, conscripts are confined to minor roles, such as a rifleman. Another major area of reform has been communications. This was a drastic problem in Georgia, and substantial funds have been invested to address this. In 2017, the Russian military procured 4,000 pieces of strategic and operational level equipment and 49,000 tactical level devices. That same year, the Ministry of Defense declared that 58% of its communications equipment to be new and modern. The utility of this new equipment was clearly on show during Russian operations in Syria, as, for example, live drone footage from Syria could be streamed directly to the National Defense Management Center in Moscow. Spetsnaz units deployed in Syria now have encrypted radio communications equipment, which can transmit target coordinates directly to artillery and air force units. This is a major improvement. The lack of reconnaissance was a crippling weakness in 2008, particularly the lack of organic recon elements at the regiment and brigade level. One of the major areas of improvement has been in the utilization of drones for surveillance. The Russians have purchased over 1,700 small and medium UAVs, all for recon, which are now distributed and utilized at the brigade level. This gives brigade and battalion commanders, for the first time, an organic airborne recon capability which vastly improved situational awareness at the tactical level. These systems have been heavily utilized in both Ukraine and Syria. With the increased use of drones, the ground forces have gained improved reconnaissance capabilities and artillery effectiveness. The impact of these reforms has been evident in Russian operations in Syria and Ukraine. As opposed to Georgia, Russian forces have demonstrated a high level of competence, coordination, and effectiveness. Situational awareness has been vastly improved, and the integration of air and ground forces is now more comparable to Western militaries. The Russians have, undeniably, come a very long way from 2008. However, the Russian military still faces substantial problems, the greatest of which is the age of much of its equipment. The stated Russian goal is to have 70% of its equipment across the armed forces to be replaced with modern equipment or modernized equipment by 2020. This seems to be an impressive goal, but some of these modernization programs are very minor. The upgraded T-72B3, implemented in 2011, did not receive radically increased protection or firepower capabilities relative to the baseline T-72B model. Analysis of their performance in combat in Syria and Ukraine showed that this new modification was lacking in key areas. By 2017, only 42% of the ground forces' equipment had been through any modernization program. The Air Force is also facing severe modernization problems. In the 10 years from 2008 to 2018, the Russian Air Force only received 455 new aircraft of all types, just over 10% of the 3,800 aircraft they currently have in inventory. Additionally, the likelihood of further professionalization of the army is low, as slow economic growth is limiting the funds available to pay contract soldiers higher wages. There are several other areas of capability shortfall that limit Russia's ability to project power beyond the former Soviet Union. Russia lacks any real long-range amphibious warfare capability, and after the breakdown in relations with Ukraine, cannot replace its AN-124 and AN-22 military transports, severely hampering its strategic airlift capacity. Finally, Russia's ability to project force is further limited by a shortage of tanker aircraft. Their number has not increased in a decade and is sufficient for neither tactical nor long-range aviation. In conclusion, although the Russian military is now a potent regional force, its ability to influence events far beyond its borders is severely limited. In the words of Russian military analyst Anton Lavrov, Russian forces remain inferior in all quantitative indicators not only to the NATO bloc but also to China. Even modernized conventional weapons, which are now procured en masse, are often technologically inferior to their counterparts in the arsenals of advanced NATO countries. Tanks are one example. The bottom line is that Russia today is an even more formidable regional military force than it was before, but it is still not a global one. Russian armed forces are perfectly shaped to protect its territory and project power nearby, but as distance from the border increases, Russian military capability declines.